It's time to go on the record with WRAL News.
And thank you for joining us for On the Record. I'm Lena Tillett. We have a lot of news to get to after a very busy week. Let's start in Kansas, where voters overwhelmingly chose to preserve abortion rights in their state constitution. The outcome of the ballot measure and the huge turnout for a primary election stunned many political observers. And now Democrats in North Carolina are hoping this issue will motivate their voters this fall.
And the fact that Kansas was the canary in the coal mine for this, and we got that kind of result, I think sends a very, very strong message to the rest of the country.
Now, it's critical to note we do not have a specific abortion question on the ballot here. However, Republican legislative leaders say they will vote on abortion restrictions next year. So far, Governor Roy Cooper has vetoed any attempts. Republicans can pick up 3 more seats in the state House and 2 more in the state Senate during the midterm elections, thus overriding the governor's veto. Tonight, we discuss with Democratic State Representative Julie Von Hafen, Executive Director of the NC Values Coalition, Tammy Fitzgerald, and Meredith Political Science Professor David McLennan. Thank you all for joining me. Professor McLennan, I'll begin with you because the vote in Kansas was not close. Voters chose to preserve abortion rights by 18 points. Were you surprised by that result?
By the margin, yes, because this is a state that went by 15 points for Donald Trump in 2020. It's had a history of being a conservative state. So I think looking at public opinion polls in Kansas prior to the vote, you might have thought it would have passed barely, but I think it did show the strength of the people who wanted to keep some protections for women in terms of getting abortion was really there.
Ms. Fitzgerald, what did that vote tell you?
Well, I think it showed that the other side, the pro-abortion side, aided by the media, branded the amendment as Republicans wanting to ban abortions without any exceptions, putting women's lives in danger, which was just not the truth at all. And so it's important for Republicans in this upcoming midterm election in North Carolina to make a contrast, to draw a contrast between the extremism of the Democrat position, which advocates for abortion on demand up until the day of birth, paid for by the taxpayers, against the very reasonable position that Republicans have taken.
Do you think Republicans, though, misjudged how many people might not believe in abortion personally, but they don't want politicians making that decision for women?
Well, I think that Republicans misjudged the strength of their opponents in this referendum campaign, because apparently the message got through from the pro-abortion side, but not from the other side, from the pro-life side. And all the amendment did was give the power back to the people through their elected representatives in the legislature in Kansas. Unfortunately, the abortion industry was able to paint it as a dire amendment that was going to actually affect people's rights when it didn't, in fact, do that.
Representative Von Hafen, Kansas had a specific question on the ballot about abortion. Democrats in North Carolina will not have that. How do you convince voters that reproductive rights can be impacted by the candidates they support?
Well, I think ever since the Kansas decision was voted on this week, it's basically indicates that people all across this country do not want politicians in the exam room with them during the most personal times of their lives. And I think that that is what we are going to be continuing to talk about on the campaign trail this year. We know that voters in North Carolina, polling continually indicates that people do not want their right to obtain health care, their right to obtain an abortion, to be taken away in North Carolina. And we will continue to make sure that people understand that the only reason that North Carolina is one of the few remaining states in the Southeast that abortion is legal is because of our ability to uphold Governor Cooper's vetoes, which we've done consistently since 2018. And if we do not maintain those numbers in the House and the Senate, then that ability will no longer be in existence here in North Carolina. And we know that Republicans will attempt to pass laws to take away those rights here.
Is that message getting through? That could be kind of a convoluted message, right?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that if, while I'm at the doors, I'm already, out canvassing, talking to voters. And I ask them, what is one of the top issues that you're thinking about as you're voting this year? And you would be surprised how many people say my reproductive freedom. So we know that it is at top of mind for voters this year. And I think it's just making sure that they understand that we have to maintain our numbers, hold the seats that we have, and hopefully get a few more.
Professor McLennan, she just talked about it's a top issue for many voters. Are you seeing that being evidence, or any evidence rather, that this is a top issue over, say, inflation or public safety?
Well, I mean, polling done prior to the Kansas situation indicated that economic issues, as they are almost in every election, were top issues for voters. I think what this issue will do is among certain constituent groups, it may be the kind of thing that will bring them out that they wouldn't have otherwise voted. Young women, for example, may come out in higher numbers than they would have otherwise. So, right now, we're still 4 months out from Election Day. I think we've got to look at a few more months worth of polling to say that this is the top issue for some, if not all, voters.
I think it's interesting what Ms. Fitzgerald just said, Professor McLennan, about the fact that the vote preserves those rights in the state constitution. However, now state lawmakers can still pass severe restrictions on abortions. Do you think that voters understood that in Kansas?
There was a lot of campaigning going on both sides, including some confusion around whether to vote yes or no. My impression is with most complex issues that voters have a pretty surface level understanding of what was going on. Just to kind of wrap back to North Carolina for a minute, it's a very nuanced issue in North Carolina. About 10% of North Carolinians want a complete banning of abortion with no provisions for protecting the life of the mother. Most North Carolinians fall somewhere in the middle. They don't want complete access until the day of delivery. They want some restrictions on abortion. So, it's one of those issues where it's not yes or no. It tends to be very nuanced there in the middle.
And we should note that the CDC says fewer than 1% of abortions actually happen after the baby is considered viable, which is 24 weeks. And that was typically in the case of preserving the life of the mother. Ms. Fitzgerald, you've said you want North Carolina to do much more to restrict access to abortion. What specifically do you want to see here?
Well, I'd like to reframe it. It's really about protecting the life of an individual human being, because we believe that all unborn babies are human beings and they deserve human rights. 70% of the country, 70% of North Carolinians do not agree with the extreme position that the Democrat Party has taken and that most Democrats are campaigning on this season, which is abortion on demand up until the day of delivery, paid for by taxpayers. What we would like to see is the biggest protection for life that we can build consensus around. We would hope that would be somewhere around a heartbeat, when you can detect a heartbeat in an unborn baby. Most people associate a heartbeat with life. Even at the end of life, they check your pulse to see if you're still alive. And we certainly believe a baby is a human being before that, but certainly by the time you detect a heartbeat, everyone can agree that it's a human being, and those human beings deserve rights. They deserve human rights. So they're separate from the mother.
What evidence do you have that taxpayers are paying for this?
Well, at the federal level, they're paying for this through Medicaid. In North Carolina, we basically defunded abortion, thanks to the leadership in the House and the Senate. But at the federal level, we're still funding abortions as well as overseas.
Okay, well, I know that will certainly be challenged by a lot of Democrats. Representative Von Hafen, so abortion rights supporters say Democrats have shied away from this issue for years, almost afraid to talk about it. How do you respond to that? And do you see that changing now?
I agree. I feel that, we took our rights for granted for many, many years. I mean, we had no idea, for a long time that a solid constitutional right that we've had for 50 years would ever be taken away. But honestly, abortion rights advocates have been sounding the alarm for many years since Republicans began taking over state legislatures about 10 years ago. And I think that, for me, this was not a surprise. This is something that, because I work on this issue a lot, that I knew that the overturning of Roe was probably going to come. And here in North Carolina, we've been trying to prepare for this moment by, supporting, laws like the one that I filed last year, which would remove many of the barriers that already exist to obtaining an abortion here in North Carolina. Republicans for many years have put up all these barriers. So even though abortion is still legal in North Carolina, it's extremely hard to access because of all these different, non-medically necessary laws that they put in place. And so I believe that, we just have to keep fighting this fight. We have to keep, making sure that people know that there are people in the legislature that support their right to obtain an abortion, support their right to obtain health care. And I just want to correct, Democrats are not, campaigning on abortion on demand or taxpayer-funded abortions. We just want politicians and elected officials to stay out of the exam room. We believe that everybody has the opportunity to make those decisions for themselves.
Ms. Fitzgerald, I'll let you respond to that.
Well, we certainly don't believe that abortion is a right. And definitely now that the decision in Dobbs has come down, it's not a constitutional right. You should never have the right to kill a separate human being. And as pointed out in the majority opinion in Dobbs, what we're talking about here is taking the life of an unborn child, taking another life, and that puts abortion in a field of its own. We should never be able to justify that by laws or any type of so-called rights. There is no right to take the life of another human being, and that's what abortion is about.
Well, this will certainly be something we're watching very closely come the midterms. We saw what happened in Kansas, which surprised a lot of people. We'll see if this is indeed a top issue for voters in North Carolina. Thank you all for joining me. All right, coming up, police departments in North Carolina are overflowing with seized guns. What should happen to them? And is it safe to store all those guns? We'll talk with Durham Sheriff after the break.
When you see a WRAL certified accurate forecast, you know it's been verified by the largest team of meteorologists with the most powerful tools in North Carolina.
We personally write every alert and send them directly to you so that you'll always know when severe weather is at your doorstep.
Tracking severe weather or everyday weather, no matter where or how you watch. Always local, always live, always protecting what matters to you.
And that's coverage you can count on.
Welcome back. Bursting at the seams. That's how Durham's police chief, Patrice Andrews, describes the state of her department's gun storage right now. WRAL Sarah Kruger and Travis Fain reported this week that DPD had to lease 20,000 square feet of warehouse space to help store the 10,000 guns seized over the years. And here's the rub. A 2013 state law forbids departments from destroying most firearms, even after the guns are no longer needed as evidence. The law allows departments to sell them, but some chiefs are worried that puts them right back on the streets. Well, this weekend, the Durham County Sheriff's Office is hosting another gun buyback event. The question is, where will all these guns go? Joining us now to discuss is the Durham County Sheriff, Clarence Burkhead. Great to see you, Sheriff. So why are gun buybacks such a big initiative for your department?
Well, good evening, Lena. They are important because the community is asking us to do whatever we possibly can to get these guns off the street. We had a very successful gun buyback about 90 days ago, and through public outcry and demand, we're doing it again. And hopefully we will take nearly 100 or more guns off the street. In our last one, we recovered 94 guns, 5 of those weapons of mass destruction. So I think it's a very important public service to conduct these buybacks and get these guns off the street.
And we actually have some images from some of those guns that you all got at the last buyback. I mean, these are impressive guns here. So, as I said, WRAL learned departments are overflowing with guns right now. Is your department as well?
We are. Currently, we're holding over 1,500 guns, and we have a normal capacity of just shy of 500. So we're stocking weapons on top of weapons. 300 weapons are being held that are related to domestic violence cases that either have not been prosecuted yet, or that we removed from the home for safety reasons. So we are running into a storage problem, just like Durham Police and every other law enforcement agency across the state. We have an evidence room here at the Durham County Sheriff's Office, as well as an annex where we store these weapons.
So then what does your department do with the guns? I mean, you talked about the storage facility. You're asking for guns, but it seems like you don't really have a place to put them.
Well, the unique thing that we can do with the gun buyback is these weapons are voluntarily surrendered to us, and we will compensate the person who turns them in for doing so. But in about 90 days, we're able to petition a judge after we've run all of the checks to make sure it's not stolen or it's not tied to another crime or it's been reported in another jurisdiction as being stolen. So we do all of those checks through our data system. And once the weapon has been cleared, in 90 days, as I said, we can petition a judge for an order of destruction. And that's what we have done in the past, and it works. But again, it only gets at those weapons that we seize or that we retrieve during the gun buyback. The other weapons, we are still bound by that 2013 law that you referenced. Hopefully that legislature may take that up in the coming months, that we can relax some of those restrictions. But right now we are certainly bound by that law.
And just so I'm clear, there's a different process between what you're able to do with guns that are seized versus these guns that you're getting voluntarily from people, because it was our understanding from the law that police can only destroy guns if there is no longer a legible serial number or if it's unsafe. But you're saying you can petition a judge to destroy these guns coming from buybacks.
That is correct. And again, we have to perform all of our normal checks to make sure, again, this gun is not tied to a crime or is not linked to another jurisdiction. But yes, we can petition the courts. Hopefully, those orders of destruction will be granted. The judge has the final say, but we have the authority to petition that judicial official for that order of destruction. That is correct.
All right. Well, we're going to follow up with you after this to understand the law surrounding that a little bit more, because this is interesting and a little different from what our understanding of the code was. Sheriff Burkhead, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, Vinfast is building one of the largest auto manufacturing plants on the East Coast in North Carolina. So who are they? We sent reporter Matt Talhelm all the way over to Vietnam to learn more about this billion-dollar company. Matt will tell us what he learned when we come back.
No matter where news breaks, we get there first.
We're up at WRAL Sky 5 to give you an aerial view.
Because when breaking news happens,
10 to 12 ambulances on the scene.
There's no time to wait. WRAL, coverage you can count on.
Welcome back. This week, Vietnamese automaker Vinfast put its money where its mouth is, so to speak, and purchased the 1,700 acres of land in Chatham County that it needs to build its electric SUV plant. The price tag, $44 million. Now, only a handful of people have actually driven this SUV that will soon be built here, and that includes our Matt Talhelm, who traveled to Vietnam to learn about the company.
This is where the rubber meets the road for an electric SUV that's not on the road anywhere yet. We got behind the wheel of the Vinfast VF8 on a closed course winding through the island mountainside in Nha Trang.
We are some of the first in the world to get to take this VF8 out for a test drive.
Our instructor An showed us the technology, controlled through a nearly 16-inch screen.
It's integrated with a lot of smart features.
And voice recognition, so you can talk to your car.
Hey, Vinfast, turn up the air conditioning. It's hot.
We waited for the wave to take off.
He's waving me through. Up to 120 kilometers per hour?
Make it 120 kilometers.
I think 120 is about 75 miles per hour.
Vinfast is moving ahead at its own high speed to get the VF8 on the road in the U.S. by the end of the year. Those will come from the factory here in Vietnam before it becomes one of 2 electric SUVs the company plans to build in North Carolina. It's the 5-year-old automaker's debut outside its home country. I asked Vinfast Global CEO Tillet about that in a one-on-one interview only on WRAL.
A lot of people won't get the opportunity to come to Vietnam to test drive a car here in the mountains. How do you get them to trust that a young Vietnamese car maker is going to be successful in the U.S. and in North Carolina?
Seeing is believing. We wouldn't bring the car to the consumer. Our marketing is direct to consumer. We bring the car to consumer, we let people test drive, and event similar to in Vietnam or elsewhere, people will be convinced.
Twee tells WRAL work will begin in the next week to prepare the nearly 2,000-acre site in Chatham County for construction of Vinfast's $4 billion factory.
The message that we like to give to the people in North Carolina, in Chatham County, North Carolina, in the U.S. In general, we are serious about what we're doing, and we would like everybody to give it a try and keep an open mind.
I gave the test drive another try.
Should we get it up to 120 again?
But I'm no gearhead.
Pretty much mainly cover electric vehicles, so I guess that's why I'm here today.
So we'll let Andrew Lambrecht share his first impressions of getting behind the wheel of the VF8. He's a contributor to Forbes Wheels and a North Carolina native.
So first impressions, I've driven a lot of EVs before. It felt very similar to the Volkswagen ID4 and a lot of its competitors.
Lambrecht says with some small software tweaks, Vinfast can compete to put more electric horsepower on the highway.
I have high hopes for Vinfast, and I really hope that just with some changes, this car will do very well in the U.S. market.
And Matt Talhelm joins us now live via Zoom. So Matt, how did it ride?
I mean, it's a very smooth ride. I've actually never driven an electric vehicle before, so this was the first time. I didn't have a lot to compare it to, so that's why we did ask some of the experts there. You know, we were on this visit with a lot of auto industry experts who get really psyched out and nerd out about these cars. They all said for a brand new vehicle that hasn't been on the road yet, that still is in development, this was a pre-production model. They said, you know, it is driving pretty well for this, and it should be competitive, especially with some little software tweaks, maybe to make it a little bit faster to get that startup going a little bit stronger there.
I got to say, your instant math there, just being able to talk about kilometers to miles per hour, very impressive. So you talked to Vinfast's global CEO. She said, seeing is believing. There's a lot of trust involved here because they're a young automaker.
There is. They've only been around for about 5 years now, and they've only actually been producing the cars for even fewer years less than that. The thing that we kept hearing over and over again, whether it was when we were touring the community that Vin Group, the parent company of Vinfast, has created, or when we were seeing some of the factory and other things that they do in Vietnam, seeing is believing. That's what they kept saying. They wanted us, they wanted the world to see what they're doing there in Vietnam, to try to get past that impression a lot of folks have that this is a communist country, but they do operate as a capitalist system. They say we're capitalists controlled by communists. So they want to get past that vision that people have that Vietnam is not an automaker, or that Vietnam is not high tech enough to create these kind of vehicles. They are putting a lot of trust in consumers, though, to believe that, especially here in the U.S., but they're targeting the East and West Coasts at this point, hoping that electric vehicle drivers here will want to give it a try.
So you talked about they have Vin Homes, they build homes, Vin Pearl, they build boats, and then, of course, Vinfast. They got a university, they have a hospital. Tell me briefly, Matt, what did people who live there say their impression was of Vin Group?
Yeah, you know, we unfortunately did not get to talk to a lot of people out in the communities because we were kept so busy visiting all of these different sites. But what we did see from people and from the experience itself, Vin Group has a lot of power in Vietnam. I'll give you an example. When we were going to the airports, we had to fly from several different cities around Vietnam. We were directed right into security, right directly to our own aisles, all by people wearing Vin Group shirts and pointing in certain directions to tell us where to go. So they were able to control what was happening there at the airports and security. So they have a lot of power there.
Such great reporting. Thank you so